And we are live right here on Destination PW. Welcome to the very first episode of DPW After Dark. This is a new show that is coming straight to youtube.com/DestinationPW, in which I'll give you guys my live review of Raw, SmackDown, NXT, Dynamite, Rampage, whatever it may be, guys. We're going to be bringing some live post shows right here on the channel. Now, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why the live chat is not actually working on the stream, and that is something I will have to get figured out at some point. But nonetheless, I welcome you all to the show. If you guys want to support the channel, the best way to do that is by clicking the subscribe button and ringing the bell. This way you could get notified on all of the latest content right here on Destination PW. Tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite was truly incredible, and we're going to break it down match by match, segment by segment. We have the notes that are right here. So the good news is we have the notes. We're going to break it down one by one. This is going to be some incredible stuff. Shout out to Austin Baker for becoming a sponsor of the channel. He is a sponsor. He is a supporter. Thank you very much, Austin. You are an OG, and I greatly appreciate that. Now, with that being said, AEW Dynamite once again, had an amazing show, this time following the successful AEW All Out pay-per-view. So I am really excited about that. Overall, a great show. Overall, an incredible show. And overall, a fun show. And you're going to see that there is a common trend when I go through this list, okay? There is a common trend of things that have happened throughout the time of the show, throughout the duration of the show. There's a common trend. And we're going to discuss that in just a little bit. But ultimately, I am super excited about this show. I really just can't believe it. Nonetheless, here's the thing. When it comes to AEW, if they keep bringing shows like this, you're going to see me talk even more positively about AEW. When you get more incredible shows like this, DPW After Dark will become a main staple on this channel. My goal has always been to provide live content, and it's always been a dream of mine to do this. And for those who may have missed it, I have decided to go full-time with YouTube, so now I actually have time to dedicate myself to the channel. So just keep that in mind, something I want you guys all to know. Shout out to James Scott, who just subscribed to the channel. We are getting closer and closer to 30,000 subscribers. So the more subscribers we get, the better it is, because now this is strictly my job. So with that being said, a stacked show from top to bottom. I'm not really sure if there was anything I disliked, but feel free to go off in the chat as time goes on. I will be picking out some of the best comments. If you guys leave a super chat, go ahead and leave a super chat and let me know any sort of questions you may want answered. I can definitely do that. As you guys can tell, now that I'm going full-time with YouTube, there is a little bit of a difference within the presentation, and that's something I'm really excited about. So, with that being said, first and foremost, when it comes to AEW Dynamite on this episode, it was in Cincinnati, Ohio. And ultimately, I just have to give praise to AEW where it is due. This show clearly had a big fight feel throughout the entire duration of the show, and that really started with the opening of the show. So, you know, from the moment the show opened, you could just tell that things were about to pop off, and there's something I love about this show that I think once we get into it, you guys will truly understand. But with that being said, we got to talk about the big fight feel, because the first match on the card tonight was Dustin Rhodes versus Malachi Black. Now, Dustin Rhodes has been wrestling for 33 years, okay? He has been wrestling for 33 years, and this match with Malachi Black was exactly what I was hoping for. It actually went a little bit longer. I think it went about 16, 17 minutes. But in addition to that, what we saw, which was, in my opinion, one of the best parts about the match, it was the fact that there was some very good logic that was applied to it. So immediately in the match, you know, they get out of the ring. Malachi Black puts Dustin Rhodes through a table. Dustin Rhodes is selling a leg injury throughout this match, and there's continuity from the beginning of the bell ringing all the way to the very end. Malachi Black had worked Dustin Rhodes' leg, and then, of course, Dustin Rhodes being the ultimate veteran, he did a really good job of making sure Malachi Black looked great. So That is exactly what I was expecting. I was expecting a match that went a little bit longer than normal, but also I expected Dustin Rhodes to do some incredible stuff. So one thing that a lot of people actually haven't talked about enough on Twitter, and this was one of the things I actually enjoyed, there was a moment where Dustin Rhodes was going for a Canadian destroyer or a Texas destroyer, or whatever the hell he calls it. But due to the leg injury that he suffered during the match, it was very apparent that he couldn't land it. And then basically this sets up some very, very, very interesting stuff. So I'm just bringing it to your attention because first and foremost, this is one of those things where like the logic behind this is what makes it so much better. We did get a super chat from Sam Pillman. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He says, do you think we will see Kenny Omega against Bryan Danielson on September 22nd in New York at Tennis Stadium? Arthur Ashe Stadium is going to be a big show. And Sam, I do think we're not going to get that match. We're going to talk a little bit more about this match in just a little bit. But I did want to make it clear that this is something that we're leading to. And I'm not sure if Arthur Ashe is the stadium, but we will discuss that in just a little bit. Thank you again for your super chat. I appreciate it. So yeah, Dustin continues to sell the leg injury. Malakai Black, it's funny because commentary refers it to as like a spinning heel kick or something. In this situation, I find it to be very interesting because Malakai Black called his finisher the Black Mass in WWE. That is not what the reference is in AEW. So I find that just to be a little weird and chaotic, to be honest. But basically, the match was good. Everything about this match was good. It was a little bit of a sloppy finish. That was one of the big issues that I personally had with it, the sloppy finish. But ultimately, this was the best way to kick off the show. And this was a really, really good way to get the crowd involved. I think Dustin Rhodes showed as a veteran he can do great things. But most importantly, what I really loved about this match was the fact that, Dustin Rhodes is 30. He's wrestled for 33 years. He could have taken a completely different career path. And yet, not only did he do a great job of prolonging the story, he did a really good job of making Malakai Black look great. And I think this is where it leads to something different because if you guys didn't know, later on during the show, Malakai Black was announced for Arthur Ashe Stadium against Cody Rhodes too. So that's the second match that they're going to be having, and I'm kind of excited about that. I think Dustin and everybody in the family, I think they're doing a great job of putting over Malakai Black. Obviously, we saw Arn Anderson, Brock Anderson a few weeks ago. So I'm excited about that, but ultimately a really, really good way to kick open the match. Before we get to the CM Punk segment, I want to talk a little bit about AEW and how great of a job they're doing when it comes to developing their talent. Because when it comes to this show, the one common thing that I'm seeing consistently is the fact that AEW superstars, wrestlers, whatever you want to call them, they are doing a fantastic job. Truthfully, they're doing a fantastic job of... They look like they're having fun. Like, this is something that's missing from WWE. The talent in AEW truly look like they're having fun, and it's coming across very well on the TV screen. So that is just something to consider as we talk about this, because, again, this was a very stacked show, and according to my notes, I pretty much mention it very often. You could just tell, this is a whole new life for a lot of these wrestlers, and this is a breath of fresh air for us pro wrestling fans. So moving on to the next segment, CM Punk. He comes out and cuts a promo, and he's basically asking the crowd, what is next for CM Punk? Who is next for CM Punk? And he asked the crowd, is it Jon Moxley, or is it this person and that person? What I found to be very, very interesting here, and something that I really actually enjoyed about this, was the fact that CM Punk, again, looks like he's having fun, and it's coming across very well on the screen. His promo was actually interrupted by Taz. Taz was working the commentary table today. Excalibur was out, and Taz cuts him off and basically just says, hey, CM Punk, I've heard your interviews. I've seen your social media. You've talked a little bit about Ricky Starks or Powerhouse Hobbs. You've talked about these people. Basically don't talk about anybody from Team Taz because you don't want the smoke. And I love the trade-off between both CM Punk and Taz, but most importantly, what I loved about this segment is the fact that because CM Punk is having fun, you know this is going to lead to something special. And basically what ends up happening is Hook and Hobbs come out, and there was something that I actually want to talk about here because a lot of people may have not picked up on it. CM Punk was walking up the entrance ramp to leave, and he went through the heel tunnel. So the tunnel that is used for heel personalities in AEW, CM Punk walked through that tunnel. It's not the first time he's actually done it, so a lot of people are starting to get the impression that CM Punk in this chapter is working as a babyface, but it is eventually going to lead to a heel. And I think once that heel turn does happen, not only is it going to be best for AEW, but it's going to be great for CM Punk because we're going to get from, this nice, humble CM Punk to a cocky, egotistical CM Punk. So it's just something to consider. I know a lot of people haven't touched up on that, but AEW is always about those Easter eggs. So that is something to keep in mind. Who is the next challenger for CM Punk? Well, if I have to be honest, as I was watching the show, Team Taz getting involved tells me that the first guy that should be feuding with CM Punk, or the next guy to be feuding with him, it should more than likely be Ricky Starks, which it just tells you a lot. It tells you a lot about AEW putting CM Punk, in the second segment of the show, because typically you want your main event acts to be in the second half of the show. But right now, this first half of the show was all about the new talent or about the young talent, and I really love that. I really love that AEW has a lot of faith in their young talent, and despite the fact that they keep signing former WWE talent, I love the fact that they're very, very, they're very good at this. They're putting their younger people up and putting them up for success, and I think that's important. CM Punk going through Powerhouse Hobbs, Hook, to eventually get to, Ricky Starks. I think that would be a great thing. I think it's huge for Ricky Starks if he has that championship defended against CM Punk. I don't know if that's something that would be in the plans, but ultimately I would love to see that. AEW is creating stars here, and they're using CM Punk to help with that. So ultimately, you can't be upset about that. So ultimately, this segment right here was incredible, but there was so much more awesome stuff that happened throughout the show, so we are going to move on. We did get a backstage segment, and I'm going to kind of connect the dots here and later on in the show, but there was a backstage segment with Britt Baker, Rebel, and Jamie Hayter with Tony Schiavone and Ruby Soho. So basically, one of my key takeaways from this specific segment, which I genuinely loved, we saw Britt Baker say something to Ruby Soho and basically said, hey, why don't you run away back to catering where you just spent the last 4 years? Now, you guys all know in the past that I have had a little bit of an issue with AEW taking digs at WWE. And to be honest with you, sometimes it comes off very cheesy. Sometimes it comes off very stupid and idiotic. This was a perfect thing for AEW to execute. First of all, to get people excited about Ruby Soho, you immediately have to put her in a incredible feud. And I think AEW is actually delivering that. Ruby Soho going against Britt Baker is something I want to see. And I think Ruby Soho is somebody who definitely deserves it. That's why she won the Casino Battle Royale. But nonetheless, Ruby Soho goes against Jamie Hayter later on in the show. But again, this is something I keep talking about, right? It's the common trend here. AEW is putting so much faith in their young talent who are lesser known. Jamie Hayter is backstage, and she is getting a rub from just being associated with Britt Baker. Ruby Soho is somebody who was underutilized for the last several years, and now she's getting a big rub from somebody like Britt Baker. So ultimately, this is like some really, really cool stuff that AEW is doing. They're really piecing things together, but most importantly, they're getting you to invest your emotions into somebody who either more than likely would never get that experience in WWE, or they're getting you invested in something that realistically shouldn't be invested in when you look at how stacked this roster is. But that's what I love about AEW. They're really putting up their stars, and again, we keep talking about that common thing that we keep seeing on this episode. People look like they're having fun. Ruby Soho absolutely looks like she's having fun. And ultimately, that's what excites me here. It truly excites me to see that these people are having fun because it makes the product fun. You can tell they are less scripted. You can tell they have a little bit more freedom. And you can tell they are just genuinely enjoying whatever the hell it is that they're doing. So ultimately, what a great segment. It accomplished what it needed to. And it got me excited about Ruby Soho. Like, when I was in Chicago, I mean, I get the excitement that's there, and it was cool to see that she was revitalized and re-energized and refocused, and everything about her has shifted. But it's really cool to watch Dynamite and see that there's the continuity is still there. We're so used to seeing WWE start and stop pushes. We're so used to seeing WWE do things and drop it right away. And AEW just pretty much showed us that that's not how they do things. And I love this. And I can't wait to talk to you guys about that match in just a little bit. The next match that we get immediately after the backstage segment, we get Hobbs, Powerhouse Hobbs, and Dante Martin. Where do I even begin with this match? You know, when it comes to AEW and their young talent that we keep talking about, you know, Powerhouse Hobbs gets another incredible look, but it's not a quick match like WWE would do. Like, we look at WWE's product and we see that WWE is constantly doing these quick and squash matches. And you know, I get why they do them, but you have Powerhouse Hobbs and Dante Martin who are going back and forth. And truth be told, the best part about this match is Dante Martin got a lot of offense in, but there was a lot of things that Powerhouse Hobbs does to stop him from gaining the momentum. And again, it's the logic that is applied to this match. It is the logic that is applied outside of the ring and inside of the ring that gets the fans excited, which, by the way, let's talk about the fans. The fans did an absolutely great job tonight because Cincinnati really came through for AEW. You know, their energy was infectious. I was there in Chicago, and I think this crowd, the way it appeared to me, it looked like maybe they were just as good as the crowd in Chicago. So I loved it. Dante Martin, he's a future star for AEW. And if AEW had like a cruiserweight championship or like a light heavyweight championship, like, this guy to me should be at the forefront of that division. That is how good he is. He's incredibly young. Every time he's on TV, whether it's Dynamite or even Dark, right? Like, this guy is taking advantage of that. So the real story here, yes, Powerhouse Hobbs won, but Dante Martin continues to stand out. And that's exactly what I'm seeing in this chat as well. Stan Grubb, you're absolutely right. I felt like Dante stood out well. He did. And it's not the first time either. And he's doing things in the ring that is getting the crowd excited. The crowd is invested. See, the thing is, let's take a break a little bit for talking about the show. Let's talk about something pretty deep. Look at the way AEW produces their show. They're putting over future stars. Everybody in this company is incredibly over. The fans are invested. We're invested, right? Like, we are here live on DPW After Dark, and we're talking about AEW because we're all invested in the product. AEW continues to amaze me simply for the fact that there are guys that may have never been able to make it into the WWE, right? Some of these guys may have never even gotten a look from the WWE. But what's really cool here is they're standing out in AEW and they're making a name known for themselves in AEW. And you just got to love that. You got to love it. There was something that Dante Martin did in this match. He went for a suicide dive, and literally, as he's going for the dive, Powerhouse Hobbs goes and catches him from the neck through the rope and just throws him into the post. I mean, it's just some really incredible stuff, guys. To me, it's the exciting stuff that I think people, they're buying into on a week-to-week basis. And Dante Martin, I don't know what his promo ability is like, but as far as his age and his potential, like, this is a guy that I think the sky is the absolute limit. And I just wish AEW offered another championship, right? Like, the TNT championship right now is kind of crowded. The world championship is kind of crowded. I know, you know, Dante Martin's in the tag team, and I'm not really sure what's going on with Top Flight, but, you know, when you have a talent like this, you don't need, I think you need another championship. Like, this product, this show is bringing so much freshness to the wrestling world, and I know sometimes people don't like too many title belts, but in this situation after what I'm seeing from Dante Martin. I see guys like him, Sammy Guevara. Obviously, there's Jungle Boy and Darby Allin. I mean, like, there's a crop of talent here that can utilize another championship belt without it being oversaturated. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But if I am completely wrong, guys, I'm okay with that. I just think that's my opinion, and I think my opinion's right. So, nonetheless, let's move on. Powerhouse Hobbs does get the win. Next, we get another segment featuring American Top Team. Guys, Dan Lambert is up in the suite with Men of the Year. He's with Ego, Ethan Page, All Ego, Ethan Page, and he is in the suite with Scorpio Sky. And one of the things I have a hard time understanding about Adam Lambert, I remember his work greatly in Impact. The one thing I have a hard time understanding is why he's necessarily being paired with Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page. And it's kind of gotten to the point where there's so much talking going on with these guys, but there's not enough wrestling. We're not seeing a lot of them on Dynamite in a wrestling capacity. But nonetheless, Dan Lambert goes on to essentially just bury the shit out of AEW, as he has been doing every week. On top of that, Dan Lambert goes on to bury CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, and all of these other guys, Adam Cole. And the reason why he's doing it, he's essentially an internet wrestling fan that hates AEW. Okay? Like, the way he talks about AEW's product is literally what I imagine an AEW hater to sound like on Twitter, which I guess it works. I guess it makes sense, and that's why he's there. But nonetheless, he buries absolutely everybody. I'm not really sure what this is going to lead to or how this necessarily benefits Scorpio Sky or Ethan Page. But nonetheless, it didn't ruin the show, so it's not a big deal to me. The next segment we're going to talk about, trust me, I'm not sure if there's ever been a greater segment in the history of AEW. I genuinely believe that there's never been a better segment in AEW than what we just saw with MJF and Brian Pillman Jr. So, if you guys didn't know, they were in Cincinnati, Ohio. MJF comes out, cuts a promo. Brian Pillman Jr.'s sister, I think, was in the crowd. MJF is just blowing it up on the promo, talking about her. He made a reference to, I think it was his, to Brian Pillman Jr.'s mom. Basically, how this all started was MJF was shitting on the city of Cincinnati. In fact, he even called it Shit-Cincinnati. So to kind of get you an idea of what really went on here, you're starting to see the inclusion of MJF working, who by the way, let's keep in mind, let's kind of rewind that for a second. MJF is an emerging talent who is rising to the top of the card, who is the face of AEW in terms of heels. And now we're starting to get another, this is happening in the first hour of the show, and now we're getting some spotlight on Brian Pillman Jr., who is part of the tag team with Griff Garrison. So keep that in mind as we talk about this segment. MJF is literally obliterating the mic. MJF literally goes on to do some very incredible promo work here. He made some very, very, very vulgar references, but nonetheless, MJF delivered some crazy promo work. But what really got me excited about this, we've all talked about it in the past. We talked about it on this channel, Twitter, Discord. By the way, if you're not on the Discord server, you're missing out. The link is in the description, so just kind of keep that in mind. But basically what happened here is something that I absolutely loved, and that is MJF was complaining about losing to Jericho, and he feels like there's a conspiracy about it, and he was screwed, yada yada yada. Wardlow is standing side by side with MJF, and this is where we get this infamous line from MJF, and he basically goes on to say, he basically goes and says that he should go and move to the side of the ring and just look pretty, because that's essentially all he did, at All Out or whatever. So MJF is not happy with Wardlow. He pushes him to the side. Brian Pillman Jr. and MJF start fighting, and Wardlow actually turns a blind eye to this. So Wardlow kind of allows Brian Pillman Jr. to take on MJF, and then again, this is where logic comes in, right? So Wardlow finally gets involved, and then Brian Pillman Jr. escapes Wardlow, and then Wardlow again just kind of lets him beat up MJF a little bit. This was hands down my favorite segment of all time in AEW Dynamite history. I genuinely and truly believe it because it did so much, not only for MJF, the crowd was entirely into it, but also something that a lot of people aren't considering here is the fact that during this segment, Brian Pillman Jr. looked absolutely incredible with his promo ability here. So just kind of keep that in mind. That was something not a lot of people were talking about. I think this is going to lead to Wardlow turning on MJF, and I think we can get that match as soon as Arthur Ashe Stadium. So I think that's September 22nd. There's a couple of weeks away. Just something to keep in mind. I think that might be the direction we're heading. Wardlow splitting up with MJF, and this is all of the stuff that I'm talking about with AEW. This is not just 1 week in the making. This has been over a year in the making. So AEW continues its longevity, and they're continuing to put over their younger stars. And I can genuinely say, like, watching this segment now got me excited. I know their talks. I think they may have even confirmed it, so I might have to backtrack. They may have confirmed the match for Brian Pillman Jr. versus MJF at Arthur Ashe, which if that's the case, then maybe at Full Gear we can get Wardlow versus MJF. But nonetheless, I seen Brian Pillman Jr.'s work on AEW Dark. I've seen his work on MLW. To be honest, ever since he's been in AEW Dynamite, there was not much about him that made him stand out. His promo was absolutely fire. Then we get a backstage segment with Brian Pillman Jr., and that happens later on in the show, and we will talk about that. But ultimately, this was a fire segment. And again, this is what happens when you have a wrestling product that includes longevity and continuity in the long term of your program within your storylines. Just something to think about. Something that AEW does a lot better than WWE. WWE is all about creating moments. AEW is all about creating compelling stories. Sometimes they miss the mark. Sometimes they struggle. But it's okay because they pick themselves up and they fix it and they get back on track and then they continue to deliver great TV. So that is just something to consider. Moving on, we get Jamie Hayter versus Ruby Soho. So basically what happens here is Ruby Soho does win. She beats Jamie Hayter. Jamie Hayter is one of my favorite women roster members in AEW. I think she does a fantastic job with everything she's been doing. I don't like the idea of her being fed to Ruby Soho. Not because I don't like Ruby Soho. I think she's great. I thought her debut was great. The crowd absolutely loves Ruby Soho. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I think Jamie Hayter has potential to be a world champion for the women's division. So just kind of keep that in mind. You know, Ruby Soho gets the win. But ultimately right here, as I'm watching the show, it just kind of tells me that maybe AEW should have done something different. Maybe put Rebel against Ruby Soho. But nonetheless, Ruby Soho is completely over with the fans, which is not necessarily shocking. I mean, we all know that she's good. But I think we've kind of gotten to a point with AEW. Like, Ruby Soho was underutilized in WWE. She comes to AEW, looks better, sounds better on the microphone in the backstage segment. There's just a new little bit of swag that she's possessed with her on AEW, and I think that's, the fans are excited. They know what her potential is. WWE didn't necessarily do anything with it. That's their fault. But at the end of the day, it's like some really cool stuff for me. I think this is like the best part about AEW. They got us drawn in. AEW immediately made me a fan of Jamie Hayter when she came back and joined Britt Baker. So just something to keep in mind. Ruby Riott does get the win. The match is kind of decent. It's not the greatest match, but nonetheless, Ruby Soho, she gets the win. Statlander and Riho join the post-match beatdown. So basically what happens is Rebel, Britt Baker, and Jamie Hayter beat down Ruby after the match. Riho and Chris Statlander, come out to her aid. And I think it was Matt Black on Twitter. He said something about, basically AEW applying logic. Like, their baby faces on AEW do have friends that are backstage. They may not be in a group, but they do come to each other's aid. It's true. I mean, look at WWE. Like, Drew McIntyre gets beat down by Jinder Mahal, Veer, and Shanky. And next thing you know, when you're watching that, is like nobody comes out to help Drew McIntyre. It's like, who the hell pissed off? Who did Drew McIntyre piss off? Because if you're a babyface, you should have friends in the backstage area that are also babyface. So, like, why is there not anybody coming to your aid? I love that AEW applied this. It gets you excited about the potential trios matches they can have, tag team matches, in order to build up the storyline between Ruby and Britt, which, by the way, I think that match is going to absolutely slap, and I'm excited to see what they do with that. That is a match, though, I do want to see with a stipulation. So just kind of, if you're AEW and you really want to get people invested in your women's division, the best way to do that is to apply a stipulation here. Whether it's like a lights out match, whatever it may be, that's what I want to see. Moving on, we get a match between Shawn Spears and FTR against Dark Order. This match did everything it was supposed to. Shawn Spears and FTR get the win. This match was not so much about FTR and Shawn Spears. This match was actually more about the Dark Order, again, causing some dissension in the group. They end up losing the match. They all start beating each other up until Ty Conti and Anna Jay come out to the rescue. So they kind of come out, and you can tell they're voicing their displeasure. The Dark Order kind of straightens up their act after beating each other up. They go to the backstage area. So just something to consider here. The Dark Order is clearly breaking up. There's some sort of shift happening in this group. Whether that is to make room for Bray Wyatt or a different leader, I'm not too sure. But I do think at some point we're going to see something really cool happen here, because the Dark Order, I feel like it should almost kind of like become an NWO type thing where it breaks off into two separate groups. The Dark Order beating each other up tells me, when I see the Dark Order beating each other up, it kind of tells me that maybe in their situation in particular, maybe a new leader isn't what the plans are. Potentially AEW could be in a situation where they just break up the group entirely and everybody goes their own way. I don't think that's going to happen. I've seen somebody tweet on Twitter that maybe Anna Jay should become the leader of Dark Order. I think that would actually be really cool. The crowd loves Anna Jay and Ty Conti, so just kind of keep that in mind. It's not something I'm actually against. I think, if anything, I'm actually for it. But we have to have a smaller version of the group. I think this dissension that's happening in the Dark Order is clearly leading to something. Hangman Page is no longer there. Like, something is happening in the group. There is a reason for it. There is some logic behind it. But why? The why is really, really important for us to figure out. So I'm very curious to see how that ends up working out in the long term. But I am excited. The Dark Order is potentially going to split up. And if Bray Wyatt does become the leader, God knows how that's going to go down, because there's something very special happening with AEW programming, and the logic that's applied to everything tells me that Bray Wyatt could actually potentially be a great fit for the group. Before we move on, just a reminder, guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop a super chat, any super chat. I'll read your question on the screen. It is greatly appreciated, especially now that DestinationPW.com is my full-time job. So if you guys didn't know that, I did quit my job, and we're going to go full-time with this baby. So to kind of give you guys the expectation of DPW After Dark, we're going to be live Monday nights following Raw, Tuesday nights following SmackDown or NXT, Wednesday following Rampage, Friday following SmackDown, and Wednesdays following Dynamite, Fridays following SmackDown and Rampage. Now, my goal in order to continue producing the live show as well, it would be to do the goal of the show is based on viewership. So if the viewership in the chat is going wild and we're seeing some success with it, this series, this live show will be a great success for me as well. Now I want to move on to some really cool stuff that happened, because then we got a backstage segment. Brian Pillman Jr. cutting a backstage promo. He's with Griff Garrison. This was actually interrupted by the Acclaimed. Max Caster is now back on AEW Dynamite after being suspended. It felt like a really short suspension. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me. It definitely felt like a short suspension. But nonetheless, it would be kind of cool to see like what this leads to, because Max Caster comes out, he kind of took a shot about backstage politics, and now he has a match on Rampage against Brian Pillman Jr., which it's very clear what AEW is trying to do now. AEW didn't necessarily push Brian Pillman Jr. before, but now that he potentially could be facing off against MJF, they're going to try to give him some wins. And on Rampage, Brian Pillman Jr. beating Max Caster is a little too predictable, but it's exciting to see how they build that storyline. Again, this is a segment that really came off successfully because you can tell these guys are having fun. It looks fun to be there, okay? They're having fun on screen. They're serious when they're on screen. This is translating very, very, very well to the show, and that's why I'm just super excited about Dynamite. So, right after that, we get the Elite in the ring with Tony Schiavone. Basically, Adam Cole is introduced to the group. He comes out as a heel, and this right here really intrigued me. Immediately, as Adam Cole gets in the ring, the first thing he does before breaking down into story time, he goes face to face with Tony Schiavone. And again, AEW applying logic, not making fans forget about what's actually happening outside of AEW. Adam Cole goes to Tony Schiavone and basically says something along the lines of, if you ever even look at Britt Baker the wrong way, I will slap your glasses off of you. I'm basically going to beat the fuck out of you, right? Like, that's kind of what we got here. And so he basically calls Tony Schiavone a nerd for like 10 minutes, kicks him out of the ring, and then he starts talking about why the Elite is the best group, why AEW is the best, why, you know, the fans are there. The fans are there to see the Elite. The Elite is the reason why AEW is so successful. Adam Cole is being a typical heel. And look, put it this way, guys. Adam Cole and the Elite, they do such a great job of being assholes that, like, you'd kind of genuinely think that they are assholes, right? Like, the Elite, the way that they act, the way Kenny Omega acts, the way Young Bucks act, like, these guys all act like really big assholes that you almost never want to even talk to them because they just look like pieces of shit. But the funny thing is, that's just how good they are as heel characters. Like, they are so good at being a heel character that they get you to hate them, and they do it so well. And shockingly, too, during this segment, the crowd actually didn't pop as much for Adam Cole and the Elite as I thought they would. But everything else in this show was extremely, extremely, extremely important to the crowd, because the crowd absolutely went wild for Ruby Soho. They sang her entrance song. They popped for everything. And essentially that's what you want from AEW Dynamite. It reminded me, watching the show reminded me of the crowd in Chicago, which is awesome. So basically this is where AEW does really well, because the segment did a great job of getting them over as heels. Basically, it gets announced that Adam Cole, he does announce himself that he will be in the ring next week for the first time ever. Then Kenny Omega takes the microphone and he goes on to basically say how he hates being interrupted because he was interrupted in Chicago. And this is where things got good, guys. So Kenny Omega takes the shot basically at Bryan Danielson, and then again gets interrupted Bryan Danielson, which I think Bryan Danielson has the best music in all of wrestling right now. His theme song is like legit my favorite theme song next to Roman Reigns. So Bryan Danielson comes out, the crowd is going absolutely wild. The yes chants are filling in the stadium or in the arena or whatever. But essentially what's actually happening here, what's happening right here is Bryan Danielson confronts the Elite. Kenny Omega says, hey guys, get out of the ring. I want to invite Bryan into the ring. I want to talk to him face to face. Bryan Danielson, it's okay. And essentially, this is where things really picked up. Bryan Danielson cut a promo. Hey, you said you're the best in the world. Like, I want to fight you. Kenny Omega tells him, hey, this is not how things work. You know, and basically what he's alluding to is wins and losses matter. Bryan Danielson can't just get a match with the world champion. Bryan Danielson goes on to tell him he's scared, whatever it may be. Kenny Omega tries to throw a punch. Daniel Bryan, a.k.a. Bryan Danielson, goes on to reverse it, puts him in the crossface or whatever. I forget what his submission is called, the yes lock. But basically what happens is Bryan Danielson puts him in the headlock, and then, geez, dude, this is like where it gets really awesome. The Elite come out and beat up Bryan Danielson. So Like, that right there was just a great moment for Bryan Danielson. We saw him get active. What I really hated about this, though, was AEW did not, like, the commentary did not sell the fact that Kenny Omega was immediately tapping out. So then Bryan Danielson's getting beat up. Marco Stunt, Jurassic Express, Frankie Kazarian, they all come out to the aid of Bryan Danielson. We get an all-out brawl. Marco Stunt is wilding. He's wilding out in the ring. He's jumping on Brandon Cutler. Like, this right here was some really funny stuff, but it served its purpose. Obviously, the long-term plan here has to be the Elite versus this new group with Christian and Kazarian and Jurassic Express and Bryan Danielson. I feel like that is probably the plan here. And then I think eventually Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega, the Ultimate Dream match, World Championship match. Depending on what's happening with Hangman Page, I think there's something there. I even have some really crazy fantasy booking that I want to talk about, but I'm actually going to save that for another video, how Hangman Page can kind of fit into the mix as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. But ultimately, a really, really, really cool segment. We get our main event, guys. What a main event. Let me tell you. This entire show was so good, but this main event, it's everything I asked for. So, basically, if you guys missed the main event, Minoru Suzuki made his debut against Jon Moxley, and this match was an absolute heater. Jon Moxley basically doing a world tour against Japanese talent is an awesome thing. Minoru Suzuki is incredible in the ring, and this main event, I mean, let's just be honest. Let's just call it what it is. Like, this main event did everything it was supposed to do. You know, it totally got over Minoru Suzuki and Jon Moxley together. Both guys definitely killed it. You know, that's the thing here, man. Like, we can talk about the Forbidden Door, and the Forbidden Door has been opened, and we could talk about that. But once these guys step into the ring, there's something magical that's happening there. And I think when I see something so magical as that, right? You open the Forbidden Door, you bring Minoru Suzuki versus Jon Moxley in the main event. Keep in mind, guys, everything in the first 2 hours of the show, or first hour and a half, was legitimately putting over younger talent. Then you get Jon Moxley and Minoru Suzuki, and it's just an absolute banger of a match. Minoru Suzuki is bleeding at the end. He ends up grabbing his blood and puts it all over his mouth. Just real sadistic, real crazy. But ultimately, this is exactly what you want to see. And I think this right here it's kind of interesting because a lot of people aren't talking about it, but the whole thing with Tanahashi versus Moxley, it's something that people want to see, but they haven't necessarily given it to us. I am fully under the belief that at the stadium show in New York, Arthur Ashe Stadium, I'm just saying, don't be shocked if we get another Japanese legend to go against Moxley. Don't be shocked if that guy is Tanahashi. If it is Tanahashi, just understand that the crowd will absolutely go nuts. And that's the beauty about Dynamite. This show, as I said in the beginning, everything has a big fight feel. Everything. Everything on this card from top to bottom reeks importance. And then some people are like, oh, Jon Moxley he's just going against New Japan talents. Like, he's not being utilized correctly. And I hear this and I'm thinking to myself, like, what do you mean he's not being utilized correctly? Jon Moxley is doing something that a lot of people don't have the option to do, and he is running with it, and he's doing something cool, and the crowd is going crazy for him. And right now, what's kind of happening with Jon Moxley is he's becoming the ultimate babyface. He's becoming the ultimate babyface. I mean, that is legitimately what is happening. So, you know what? Like, as far as that goes, when you got a guy like that who's becoming the ultimate babyface, shit, dude, like, take advantage of it and then, build up a heel turn. Eventually make him heel. People, for those who think he's wasting his time, let him keep doing it. Turn him heel. We already know Jon Moxley's going to be a badass heel anyways. There's just so much cool stuff that's happening in AEW, guys. And I don't know. I feel like as a fan, I feel like I'm kind of being revived. It's like I looked at WWE Monday Night Raw, and it's just the same rematches over and over again. And don't get me wrong, AEW is not the best, but we saw the debut of Minoru Suzuki. We saw the debut of Bryan Danielson. We saw Ruby Soho. We saw all these things at All Out. How can you not enjoy this? Like, as a fan, look, let's shoot straight. AEW didn't have Andrade on the show today. To me, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. Why not have Andrade on the show? But now it makes me want Andrade on the show so much more. So I'm completely bought in, and I'm excited about that. That's the thing to me. I don't think a lot of people understand is like the best way to build the show is over deliver on a weekly basis, but not oversaturate the show. So if we're constantly seeing Andrade, then it's a problem. And plus, we already know that Andrade is going to be taking a match against Pac. So like, I would love to see him more on the show, but it is, to me, it shows that AEW is in a situation where like they're carefully planning things. Every little detail is thought about. They are considerate of us fans. They don't insult our intelligence. And most importantly, the guys on the roster, the women on the roster, like these people are absolutely so good at what they do. And I think if you put these storylines in WWE, they would not work out. If you put all of this episode inside of a WWE arena, inside a WWE ring, I don't know if it would look as good as it should, because there is something about AEW's presentation. It is not overproduced. It's not underproduced. It's just the overall presentation and vibe of the show is so much better than WWE. And now we got talks about Kevin Owens, Bray Wyatt possibly showing up at Full Gear. I mean, guys, what is next for AEW? That's what I want to know. Like, I want to know what is next for AEW, because the way that they're doing things right now tells me that AEW is absolutely on a tear. And it just like, it's sick, man. I don't see how they lose to AEW or to WWE. I don't see it. I don't see how WWE can beat AEW right now. And I'm struggling with that, to be honest with you guys. I actually am struggling with that. A lot of people are telling me that WWE doesn't need to worry about AEW, and when I hear about that, it's kind of mind-boggling, Why would WWE not need to worry about AEW? Is it because AEW is not doing 2 million viewers? Because here's the thing. They're absolutely not doing 200 viewers, 2 million trillion zillion viewers, right? Like, AEW doesn't have the viewership WWE has, but if they keep this up and WWE continues to lose momentum as they have, the internet is a very powerful place. We are already seeing the momentum shift towards AEW. But the next thing would be essentially what I think would be, WWE losing viewers, and to the point where AEW catches up, and then AEW becomes the big thing, So it's just something to keep in mind. It's, WWE is really going to have a hard time with this, but who knows, man? Who actually knows? What a great show. What a great show. I want to start taking a look at some of the comments. How is everybody doing in the chat? Everybody's doing good. I hope everybody's doing good. I'm reading the chat. It looks like everybody's having a good time, which is great. The Discord server, by the way, is... Man, I love being in Discord. I love reading the Discord. And it's cool, man. It's so many wrestling fans and together. Like, I'm just happy we could be doing this. I'm just happy we could all be together and talk about wrestling. And I'm glad that I'm taking my shot and making this my full-time gig. So ultimately, I'm really excited about what's to come to Destination PW. I want to do more live streams. So if you guys want more live streams from me, make sure you guys like this live stream. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. It would be incredibly appreciated if you guys could do that. Yeah. I was just taking a look at the stream on YouTube, and it does look really sick. So thank you guys for that. Appreciate you. I'm just excited to be doing this. But anyways, if anybody has any other last minute questions or super chats, let me know before we conclude the stream, I should say. And then I'll be back tomorrow on youtube.com/DestinationPW and bring more content. News videos all day, baby. Every day, new content every single day. We got some big stuff happening in the world of wrestling, so why not talk about it? Okay. Well, that concludes the very first episode of DPW After Dark, Episode 1, AEW Dynamite's conclusion. Overall, a great show. I'm going to post a poll in the community tab. It's going to be in the community tab of my channel. Make sure you guys vote in the poll. I want to know what you guys give the show: a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumb in the middle, thumb in your nose. I don't know. But I can't wait to hear about it, guys. So tell me all about it. And if you guys could share the channel with your friends and everything, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys again for watching, and I will see you guys next time.